Hello YouTubers, this is Anthony from Antec Technical Services again doing a review on an installation I did in March earlier this year. I'd just like to do a recap and a follow-up on the first Lux Power units I had installed, which were connected in parallel, and they became faulty at some point. And basically after doing some research checking, we found out that no, the actual problem wasn't really the units or the external power. It was actually internally, where there was a loose plug that we found that had shorted, was wrongly connected on the property inside, and that short kicked back into the inverter. That's exactly what had happened. So since then we've managed to fix the inverters, sort them out, and they are running in parallel perfectly. Joint sharing. The other thing I've also done is I've replaced the fuse disconnectors, because the fuse disconnectors I was using were quite cheap units. So this is one of the fuse disconnectors that I've just replaced. The previous fuse disconnector, this is what happens when you buy cheap stuff. When you buy cheap stuff, that's what really happens. And you always have errors on your inverter saying open, battery open, because of loose connections. Right. In particular today, I just want to show you what I've done, what I've added, the changes I've made to this previous system. So from the DC side, coming from the solar panels, I've got two strings coming in with two strings with fuses. So it arrives on the fuses first, then out, positive and negative, into a surge arrestor, red and black, into a DC isolator. So if you're busy doing some work and you want to isolate the system from upstairs, you need a DC switch to actually isolate, so you could work on the DC side of the system. So both strings, if you've noticed, each has its own surge arrestor, plus DC, minus DC, and at the bottom I've tap out your earth wire, linked it to a common bus earth wire at the top there. So that's the DC side of things. And then moving right along on the AC side of things, I've left the boards open specifically because I wanted to do a bit of explaining, follow up on my last videos I did on your AC protection box. So what I've done now with the AC protection box, this is what we've done here already. So currently, as you can see on the DB here, I've got the main switch in black, stove geysers in black. I've got a breaker, an isolator that I've assigned to feed the UPS to charge the batteries and the like. And I've also got an alternative supply coming back in red as a main switch as well. What I've done on the main board here also, I've plugged in a couple of stickers for just any other electrician that would want to do some repairs on this board, to be actually aware that there is a dual supply. There's both ESCOM and solar PV on the roof here. And I've also put some stickers here, all red circuits supplied by inverter. So as you could see, anything that's labeled in red, lights, pool, plugs, and the earth leakage, all of these are being supplied from via the UPS, either through a bypass switch or directly from the solar. It actually helps any maintenance electrician doing some work here to both isolate the red mains and the black mains. That's how you shut off power on the property. Moving right along, so there's a breaker isolator here that's labeled to UPF. It's a double pole that supplies power to the changeover switch. This is where the bypass happens. If we need to replace the units or fix the units, or for some reason the solar system is not functioning properly, we use this changeover switch. So with the breaker facing up, it's actually pointing towards ESCOM. And if I pull the breaker down, everything bypasses through the inverter, and everything is actually on standby waiting to be charged. So what I've done is I'm supplying power from the main board into the changeover switch first, where the power arrives, and then I tap out of the changeover switch to our AC protection box. So on our AC protection box, I've put a surge arrestor that will assist in terms of when your main grid supply voltages are not stable. They are probably higher than your standard allowable voltages of 250, 253. If that rises above to 275, it can damage your electronic equipment in your property. So the purpose of this guy is to drain everything that comes from ESCOM above 275, drain it down to ground to protect equipment in terms of the high surge water view. So what I've done is, if you've noticed, from the changeover switch, I bring the live first into the surge and the black into the surge first at the bottom, and then out of the surge will I tap into the inverter input. So I've got inverter 1 at 32 amps on my lux power, tapping out at the top to inverter 2 on the lux power to the inverters 1 and 2. Then from the inverter output, I have my 16 amp, because I know these inverters have a max output of 22 amps. So I would love to protect these inverters, that if there's a high pull or a high draw on the house, before the inverters trip, it must first meet the 16 amp to trip the breaker. And all the outputs at the bottom, it's where I've actually linked the 2 inverters back to the changeover switch and then into the house. I've also added a new baby on the ground. I call this a neutral bridge relay. So what I've done is, on top where the supply from ESCOM comes in to supply the breakers, I've tapped out a red wire to power up the coil of this neutral bridge relay, or a contactor for those electricians may know what it is. And I've also tapped out neutral as well to come and supply the A2 of the contactor. And then on this contactor, I've brought in an earth wire into a normally closed contact when the contactor is off. And at the bottom, I've also tapped out the actual power coming from the inverter's neutral to there. This is called an earth neutral bridge. So what usually happens when your inverters are inverting off grid and there's no ESCOM, what happens is you lose your earthing, your grounding, your reference that will be able to activate your earth leakages on the board should there be an electrical fault, or any live metal parts becomes live whatsoever, or any power leaks into the neutral or on the earth. This is there to protect you in the house, to trip your breakers whatsoever that's plugged via that. For the job of this guy is to actually, when ESCOM goes, it closes. There's a little red light that disappears that links neutral and earth and the neutral to create a ground reference to allow your earth leakage to function. And as well, without this unit, if you were to take your multimeter and measure between your earth and your neutral, you'll be picking up what we call elevated voltages of 20 volts to 120, which can be lethal should there be a fault in the house. So a lot of installations that we've done over the past and a lot of installations today do not have this guy. This is the most important unit you will ever need to have on the property, no matter how expensive your solar system might be, with all the fancy connections with your lithium batteries here and there. Without that unit on your property, you are literally at risk of causing a hazard or a shock. So basically the job of this guy is to create a ground reference, and any elevated voltages, once you bridge the earth and the neutral, when ESCOM is gone, it creates a zero ground, creating a zero reference. So it's very important. So in the previous video, you notice I had put a voltage protector for the unit. Well, that voltage protector, I've taken it out simply because it is just an extra precaution, A lot of suppliers would demand that you have that on your house, because the specifically in a specific area, like in your mining areas or where the high industrial area, where you have your voltages going up and high, where the grid is not stable, that protection would be good. But I'm in a suburb area where we don't have issues with ESCOM in terms of voltages being high. Only specific areas you will need that voltage protector. It is not a must. It is an added protection to your electronics of the sensitive inverters we have. But I personally feel that the surge arrestor is good enough to protect you from your surge, plus your breakers that will easily trip to protect your equipment. But however, you've got extra budget, you can go for it. So this relay here, it's advertised on the market as a neutral bridge relay, selling for about 1,500, 1,600, 1,008, depending on what the supplier requires. So you need this unit no matter what the circumstances could be. So however, the main gift on the video was specifically this guy. I hope you could read about the earth neutral bridge and understand its purpose on your property, especially today. A lot of houses that have got alternative power, they require that item. So basically, these are the additions I've just made to these units, and having fixed these inverters, it's been a couple of months now. They are inverting properly, they are operating in parallel, they are functioning efficiently, and you could see Smiley and Mr. Normo there saying that they are happy. And these inverters have been running now for over almost a week now, I should say. I've not had any issues at all. And as you could see right now, the batteries are charging. And I've got and also very importantly, when you are going to link batteries and inverters, you need a copper bus bar where you can bridge all your batteries in parallel, plus your fuse disconnectors will come and bridge at this point. So every inverter as well must have its own fuse disconnector when you are isolating the inverters from the batteries. Well, YouTubers, this has been the longest video I believe I've made so far, and I hope this has been helpful to somebody. Oh, and by the way, specifically for the Lux Power, we are using standard UTP cables on the inverter, 2 cables per inverter. So if you notice, on the master inverter, I will connect the first UTP cable on the first parallel to the second parallel of the inverter, and then the second UTP cable to the first of the slave inverter. This is called the binding cable that binds both inverters. And then the outer ones are the ones that are for communication and what have you of the inverters. So basically, and I've noticed the new Lux Powers now, they actually come with filters because it breathes in from the bottom and pushes from the out. So to keep dust away from the inverter, you want to put filters at the back that are easily to just slide out and clean. And I don't think I've left out anything, but as far as I can remember, everything seems to be 100% functional. And this is Anthony again, excited about my review and the updates that I've added to this client's installation. And for those that are looking to get hold of me, you can get me on 082 3427 946. 082 3427 946, and my email is anthony@antec.co.za. Before I close up, one of the most important things that one needs to realize, that the job of us installers is to do 3 things: is to protect people, animals, and property, according to the SANS regulations 10142-2 edition 3 of 2020. I think it was in July that it was released, that in everything that you do in your installation that have to do with electrical, the first thing when you are installing, whatever is ringing in your mind at any given point, is to protect people, animals, and property. So your earthing is very vital. So I have my main earth that everything comes to a central point and goes to the board. You also have to bond your inverters. Should it become live, the purpose of that job is to create an earth loop path to trip whatever devices, including your batteries. Very, very vital. All your batteries need to be earthed. The number one thing in all your fancy installations as well is to make sure that even from your panels on your roof, please always verify that your panels are earthed as well, and you've got earth ground clips to bond everything. Should you have any faulty live leaking into any metal part, that should cause a trip. Well, YouTubers, this is Anthony Mwambazi from Antec Technical Services signing out. See you soon. Bye-bye.